On June 9 of 2012, a father in Selma, California called the police to let the authorities know that he had just killed his entire family and that he was about to do exactly the same to himself. What the police was to uncover was more than just the story of a family's annihilation. What came to light was that this man had killed at least 10 other people. This is the story of all the victims of Avtar Singh. Hi, welcome to Collectively Vigilant. I'm Dr. D. If you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe. So, when I was researching this story, I thought I was basically researching the story of a family that had lost its lives at the hands of their father. But apparently, the same man was wanted by the Interpol for the killing of many, many people, including a human rights attorney. So let's start with the last day of the lives of an entire family, and especially a man named Avtar Singh. So on June 9 of 2012, this was approximately 13 years ago, this was a Saturday morning, and the police arrived within minutes of getting this phone call from the murderer himself, Avtar Singh. But they couldn't step into the house immediately, as they knew that the man who had placed this call had a military background and they feared that the entire house might be rigged with explosives. So the police went door to door and evacuated all these sleeping families of the entire cul de sac. Pine Street was a quiet neighborhood, and to get to Pine Street, one has to go through endless vineyards and peach orchards, which stood in eerie contrast with what had just happened in Pine Street. The police had to go in with a SWAT team because, as I said, they feared that the entire house might be rigged with explosives. So they were treading extremely lightly. The SWAT team made its way through a beautifully manicured lawn. In this lawn, every single blade of grass stood equally leveled, and the house was as neat as they come, which is what made everything that they found inside the house extremely disturbing. As the police went from room to room, they found one body after another and they found blood splattered all through the walls of the house. First, they found 49-year-old Avtar Singh, who was in the outermost room of the house, which was the living room. In the bedroom, they discovered his 40-year-old wife, Harvinder Kaur, and right next to Harvinder, on the king size bed, was the couple's 3-year-old son, Jai Singh. In the second bedroom off to the side, the police found Avtar Singh and Harvinder Singh's eldest child, 17-year-old Kanwal Singh. And as they were about to step away from Kanwal room and enter the next room, they suddenly heard gurgling sounds coming from the room right next to them. And that's when they found Avtar and Harvinder Kaur's middle child, 15-year-old Kanwaljit Singh. Now, everybody used to call Kanwaljit Singh Aryan at home. Though Aryan had survived, he had severe wounds on his head because he had taken several gunshot wounds into the head and a part of his brain was also exposed. He was rushed into the community regional medical center at Selma and placed on life support. So the man who had called them up, Avtar Singh, was not an American Armed Forces veteran. He was, in fact, an Indian Army veteran. Avtar Singh had become very familiar to the police in Fresno, California, because of two separate incidences. The first incident was in March of 2011 when Avtar Singh himself called the police and said that he was being bothered by a man called Zahid Rafiq. Avtar Singh demanded a restraining order be placed on this man, and he said that he needed this restraining order because the man who was trying to contact him and bother him was basically harassing him. And I put the word harassing in air quotes because as I tell you who this man who was trying to contact him was, you'd probably start smiling. The man who Zahid Rafiq, who was trying to contact Avtar Singh, was in fact a journalist who wanted an interview. So this sounds slightly strange, right? That all of a sudden can you ask for a restraining order against a journalist? While the short answer is you can ask for a restraining order against anyone who's harassing, threatening, or stalking you. And if the level of harassment goes up a certain level, you can ask for something which is a restraining order. One has always heard of these kind of restraining orders, which are domestic violence restraining orders, but this one in particular is called a civil harassment restraining order. So in America, because of the First Amendment rights of the press, it is extremely rare that a restraining order is placed against a journalist. And in fact, a restraining order was never issued in this case. Now, secondly, so that was the first reason why the police knew about Avtar Singh. The second reason why the police knew about Avtar Singh is because on 26th of March of 2011, Avtar Singh's own wife had called the police and had Avtar Singh arrested on domestic abuse. The police had taken him into custody and charged Avtar Singh with domestic violence charges. And as is protocol, when someone is charged with these kind of things, or they're taken into custody for any reason whatsoever, they're fingerprinted. And the second they fingerprinted Avtar Singh, the police truly realized what kind of person they were dealing with. Because immediately they saw that there was a red alert notice issued against Avtar Singh by the Interpol on behalf of the government of India. Apparently, Avtar Singh had fled India as he was in the process of standing trial for the extrajudicial killing of several people. The police then waited, the police in Fresno, California, waited in 2011 to hear from the Washington Interpol office to get back to them, and they kept Avtar Singh in custody for 2 days. However, the Interpol Washington office never really got back to the police in Fresno, California, and they had to let Avtar Singh go. Singh, however, was put on a 36-month probation because he had battered his wife, but otherwise he was a free man. Now, all true crime people truly already know what Interpol is. Interpol is a communication network which basically just passes messages from one law enforcement agency across international borders to another. And the Interpol's Washington office passed along the message that they had Avtar Singh in custody in Selma, California, to the National Bureau of Interpol in India. And the spokesperson of the Washington Interpol said, quote, quite a few contacts were made with little to no response, unquote. In the same article, the Interpol Washington office then said that the Indian government had to initiate whatever extradition process needs to happen. He went on to say, we don't get involved with governments, we deal with police to police communication only. And the person whose quote I just read to you is Miss Miller from the Washington Interpol office. So back in Selma, California, Police Chief Dick, and it's spelled DYCK, he waited for 2 days for a word from whatever Interpol authority, but as I earlier said, nobody responded, and they had to release Avtar Singh. So Avtar Singh goes back, and shortly after this particular case of wife battering, Singh and his entire family changed homes, and they moved from their earlier residence, which was on McCall Avenue, to Pine Street, which is where the family finally lost their lives. After Avtar Singh was connected, in connection to the battering of his wife, as I told you earlier, the same journalist, Zahid Rafiq, tried to get in touch with some of his colleagues in the California area so that if not Zahid Rafiq, at least someone else could get an interview with Avtar Singh. Now, Zahid Rafiq, the journalist, was at this time a Berkeley graduate and is now also a celebrated author. And he was basically asking around so that some of his fellow journalists could get in touch with Avtar Singh and ask a few questions on Zahid's behalf. However, before any other journalist could respond to Zahid Rafiq, Avtar Singh himself called up Zahid Rafiq one evening and in a very calm voice spoke to Zahid in steady English. Avtar Singh started by asking the journalist over the phone if Zahid Rafiq was from the Kashmir area in India, and why was he looking for Avtar Singh? Then, to both the questions, he said, well, I am indeed from Kashmir. And then Mr. Rafiq was asked by Avtar Singh, are you in Fresno, California right now? And the journalist basically was actually already in Fresno, California, but he quickly responded and said, no, I'm going to be there tomorrow. And the minute Avtar Singh heard that, he apparently said a lot of expletives. And all the information that I'm telling you is from Zahid Rafiq's own article, which was published in the Christian Science Monitor. And I'm going to read a quotation from there. He says, Zahid Rafiq's basically writes there and says, quote, you have such guts that you've come from Kashmir just to set foot in Selma and, quote, you think this is your father's Kashmir? Do you have any idea where you're going? You have guts that you have come from Kashmir. Just set your foot in Salma and I will shoot you. I will kill you. Unquote. He yelled all this in both Punjabi and Hindi and got even more upset. In response to these extremely menacing words, the journalist Zahid Rafiq asked if he knew that he was threatening a reporter, a journalist who was simply asking for an interview. And after hearing all this, Avtar Singh eventually hung up the phone. Shortly after receiving this particular phone call, Avtar Singh's wife Harvinder Kaur, in fact, sent an email to Zahid Rafiq, and she was in that email protesting the story that Zahid Rafiq had published and written about Avtar Singh's past in Kashmir. And in that particular article, Zahid Rafiq had basically asked that the government extradite him back to India. So Harvinder Kaur threatened to, in that email, Harvinder Kaur threatened to sue the magazine because they had published Zahid Rafiq's article in it. And then she said that you better apologize to my husband and my family in the next issue of the magazine. She also wrote that in her in the email that she sent, she basically said that her husband was a soldier and was a soldier of his country and had never ever spilled the blood of an innocent person. Okay, so the entire story that I've told you so far is from June 9, 2012, which was the year that the family was killed. And then I took you back into 2011, which was the year when Avtar Singh had called the police asking for a restraining order against the journalist. And that was also the year when he was taken into custody on charges of domestic violence and he was later put on probation. But both these things happened in California. And now I'm going to take you back to the 1990s, early 1990s, to the Valley of Kashmir. So let's start with the story of a man called Jalil Andrabi, a 36-year-old civil rights attorney who had three children and was a married man and was also the chairman of the Kashmir Commission of Jurists, which is a human rights organization. I'm talking about Jalil Andrabi, he fought over many, many years to improve prison conditions in Jammu and Kashmir and documented cases of arbitrary arrests, arbitrary detention, and custodial killings and disappearances. Following all the petitions that Jalil and Rabi had filed in the High Court in Srinagar, in October of 1994, the courts actually ordered district committees in Jammu and Kashmir, district committees made up of judicial, police, and medical authorities, to regularly visit the jails in Jammu and Kashmir and detention centers and police lockups of the state. In October 1995, following another petition filed by Jalil and Rabi, the state government of J&K at that time, Jammu and Kashmir, gave assurances that no prisoner would be detained out of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And Jalil and Rabi even represented the Kashmir Commission of Jurists before the United Nations Human Rights Commission in Geneva on 18th of March of 1996. In January of the same year, which was 1996, Andrabi told newspapers that he knew that he was on a hit list just for attending the commission in Geneva. Shortly before his death, Andrabi attended a conference in New Delhi, and in that conference, he held several state authorities responsible for human rights violation in Jammu and Kashmir. On January 30th of 1996, Jalil Andrabi told journalists that two unidentified armed men, one of which was possibly Avtar Singh, had tried to lure Jalil Andrabi out of his house. And what Jalil Andrabi did was, actually his wife opened the door. His wife Rifat opened the door when these men were knocking, and they asked Jalil and Andrabi's wife Rifat if Jalil was at home. And she said, "No, well, he's not at home. Why don't you go meet him at his chambers at the High Court in the morning?" And while all this was happening, actually Jalil was at home, and he basically tiptoed his way to the window upstairs, and he basically took pictures of these two people who had knocked at his door and who were trying to lure him outside the house. Right, so these two people tried to lure him out of his house at the end of January, literally on the 30th of January. Now, the next thing that happens is in March of 1996. Right, so all that happens in January of 1996, just a month after that. So the entire month of February goes in Andrabi doing his human rights work, you know, defending people in the court. That was his job. And in March of 1996, one day, Andrabi was returning back home with his wife, and both of them were in their car. Basically, he was stopped on his way back home. Both of these people were stopped, and he was asked to exit his vehicle, and two people who looked like army personnel took him somewhere. Now, the interesting thing is that Rifat, actually, poor her, did not know how to drive her car. So, what she did was she had to get a taxi back home, and she had to leave the family car right near where Jalil and Rabi was arrested and taken. Nobody knows where Jalil and Rabi was taken. And on March 27 of 1996, Jalil and Rabi's decomposing body was found in the Jhelum River. His hands were bound, his body had been mutilated, there were several gunshot wounds all over him, and it, of course, everybody who saw the body knew immediately that he had been tortured. His body, of course, was then taken for autopsy, and during the autopsy, it was revealed that he had, though he was found on the 27th of March, he must have been dead for at least 2 weeks. So, of course, he was such a prominent person that his murder, his death, immediately created a furor all over, and at the direction of the High Court of Srinagar, because of Jalil and Rabi's disappearance, a committee, an inquiry was set up. After the inquiry was set up, there was a lot of back and forth for years, trying to trying to ask the army who was responsible for the killing of Jalil and Rabi. After a lot of pressure from civilians, a lot of pressure from the High Court, eventually the army agreed that they will, in fact, court martial a certain individual who had gone rogue and had killed Jalil and Rabi because of his own volition. And apparently, the same person had not only killed Jalil and Rabi, but had also killed a few other people who had witnessed him killing Jalil and Rabi. In total, it's speculated that Jalil was definitely killed by Avtar Singh, and the army said that it seems like he had killed at least a handful other people who were witnesses. The army also said that Avtar Singh had done this killing all by himself, and that he was, quote unquote, a renegade. So, you remember I told you that Andrabi was killed in March of 1996. On April of 1997, a committee was set up by the Kashmir police, and they filed a report before the court in which they actually named Avtar Singh. A colonel who was representing the army said that Avtar Singh was acting in his personal capacity when he killed Jalil and Rabi. He further added that Avtar Singh had served only a year as an army officer in Kashmir and had been, quote, disembodied from the service, unquote. And he was basically sent back to the territory army, which was posted in Ludhiana, and he had been withdrawn from Kashmir. The court directed the Union government to basically impound Avtar Singh's passport and prevent him from being issued a new one. And the court also asked that service files of Avtar Singh should be produced in front of the court within 4 weeks. However, after passing this order, two judges were then transferred from this court, and this this case went on for years and years. So, a year later in 1998, the Kashmir police was basically saying that they couldn't find Avtar Singh. He was nowhere to be found, and that's why they couldn't produce him in the court. However, somehow, a journalist, a famous one actually, his name is Hartosh Bal, he of the Open magazine was able to locate Avtar Singh in Ludhiana, and at this time, Hartosh Bal was actually working for a famous Indian newspaper, which is called the Indian Express. And he was able to interview Avtar Singh, and that interview was never published in the newspaper. However, Hartosh Bal, the journalist, was able to recall that Avtar Singh had completely changed his appearance, and he had cut his hair off because, as you can tell by the name, Avtar Singh is a follower of Sikhism. According to reporting by Hartosh Bal, he does remember that Avtar Singh had changed his appearance, and at the time when Hartosh Bal had interviewed Avtar Singh in 1998, he was a clean shaven man who had cut off his hair as well. And Avtar Singh said, "Well, I'm just being scapegoated. I'm not the one who has done this." By the year 2000, it was still unclear whether charges would be filed against Avtar Singh, whether the police was able to catch a hold of him or not. And according to a few journalists, it seems like around the year 2000, this is 4 years after the killing of Jalil and Rafi, Avtar Singh still lived in Ludhiana. Soon after, despite the court orders, it seems around the year 2000, somehow Avtar Singh was able to get a passport and leave India altogether. And it seems like he first moved to Canada, and after that, it seems like he moved to California, where he ran his own trucking business. The next time Avtar Singh comes to notice after the year 2000, that's when some journalists were able to catch hold of him. The next thing that we know about Avtar Singh is from around the year 2007. Apparently, someone had made a call that Avtar Singh and his family were in the US, and this call was made to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. And one of the spokespersons of this agency is a woman called Lori Haley, and she said that Singh was in fact arrested by ICE in July of 2007 for his unlawful presence in the US, and removal proceedings were initiated at that time. Now, of course, these days we only hear of ICE agents doing their work extremely quickly and deporting people from the US. But back then, they did charge Avtar Singh with unlawful presence in the US, but he was not actually deported. Right after the charges were filed in Selma, California, when Avtar Singh had battered his wife in 2011, the Indian journalist Hartosh Bal was actually able to get another interview with Avtar Singh, and he asked Avtar Singh about his deportation back to India in the light of the battery of his wife. And at this time, apparently, he told Avtar Singh apparently told Hartosh Bal, the journalist, quote, "I'm being made a scapegoat. Since I was originally from the territorial army, it is easy to disown me and deny the culpability of other organizations," unquote. Clearly, the army, basically the Kashmir army, said that whether he acted alone or not no one's sure, it seems. Neither is there any motive which ties Avtar Singh clearly to Jalil and Rabi. It's not like they personally knew each other or he had a personal animosity. So none of the cases that Andrabi had taken up in the courts were directly against Avtar Singh. It was just class action lawsuits on behalf of several people about improving jail conditions, so on as I'd said earlier. However, there is some corroboration somewhere. It does seem like somebody had come forward and said a man called Umair had come forward to the police in Kashmir at some point and did say that he knew that Avtar Singh was the one who had killed Jalil and Rabi. So, as you can tell with this whole back and forth, Jalil and Rabi's killing is still in the court system. No one's been arrested for it. Right. So far, I've told you about the killings of four family members. And I've told you about Jalil and Rabi. However, in the introduction, I did say that he he seems to have killed 10 people in total. So you must be wondering that the count in terms of family. So in total, it does seem like Avtar Singh killed a lot of people. So I did tell you about the three family members that were definitely deceased. The oldest son, the youngest son, and the wife Harvinder Kaur. However, I did tell you earlier that one of the sons was taken to the hospital by the police. Unfortunately, 2 days after he was taken in that grave condition, he did not survive. So that person, the middle son, becomes the fourth victim of his father. The fifth victim, at the very beginning, is actually Jalil and Rabi, and it does seem like Avtar Singh killed four other people who were witnesses to the killing of Jalil and Rabi. And it also seems like Avtar Singh also killed one more person. Avtar Singh is also suspected of having killed a man in a village who was an old tailor. Apparently, Avtar Singh killed this person because he suspected that his sister in law was having an affair with this person. However, some people say that was actually not the reason why he killed the old Sikh tailor. It does seem like it has something to do with money. So, in total, it does seem like he killed around 10 people that we definitely know of. It could be more. We have no idea about that. Now, let me take you back to the life of Aryan Singh. Aryan Singh was, remember, the last person of the family who died. So, after being in a coma on life support for 4 days, after being shot by his father several times in the head, Kanwal Singh, who was also named Aryan, his nickname was Aryan, was taken off life support because the trauma to his head was exceptionally severe. He died on June 14 of 2012. Now let me take you back to the words of Hartosh Bal. This is from the article that he had published of the interview that he had conducted with Avtar Singh. In the interview, uh, Avtar Singh says, quote, "The law here is on my side. The case against me will not stand in court here." Hartosh Bal then asked him about his extradition back to India, to which Avtar Singh responded and said, quote, "There is no question of my being taken to India alive. They will kill me," unquote. When Hartosh Bal, the journalist, asked him, what do you mean by they? He said, the agencies. He said, quote, "The agencies, raw military intelligence, it's all the same," unquote. In the same interview, Avtar Singh also mentioned that he was getting constant threats from Al Qaeda, but the journalist did not take that seriously. And Avtar Singh then went on to say, "If the extradition goes through, I will open my mouth. I will not keep quiet," unquote. So, as the story goes, Avtar Singh never stood trial for the killings of those 10 people. Now, those are 10 that we definitely know of. It could be more. And Avtar Singh, of course, turned the gun on himself and he died at the age of 47. What we can definitely say is he definitely lived a lot more than any of his victims. Now, if you're familiar with the podcast, you know that at the end of every single narrative, I do a criminological and legal analysis, and then the person that I host the podcast with, Sam, does a psychological analysis. Sam is missing in the video, so I will just do a criminological and legal analysis, and you'll have to tune into the podcast to see the psychological analysis. So, criminologically, how do we explain familicide or family annihilation? Okay, so basically, this can be explained through Robert Merton's strain theory. Through the story, you know that Avtar Singh was an army personnel. He was under significant personal and professional strain. He must have had some sort of trauma as well, PTSD. He had legal troubles as well. He had societal pressure, which must have contributed to all the strain that he was already feeling. He was potentially definitely involved in the killings. It's not been proven, but he was potentially involved in the politically charged killing of a human rights attorney as well, which would, of course, put even more strain on anyone. And of course, he was living with this fear of exposure at some point, that he would be deported back to India at some point. And that's why strain theory would explain why somebody like Avtar Singh would kill his entire family. Another theory that we could possibly apply here is the social learning theory. Now, this theory tells us that an individual like Avtar Singh, who was exposed to violence through his military career, had killings normalized for him, and he had learned violence was an acceptable solution to fix problems in his life. And that's why he eliminated all threats. He eliminated witnesses. He must have eliminated the people he perceived as enemies. And he also apparently also um, eliminated a love rival for his own brother. Apparently, his sister in law was having an affair. We don't know that. It's all apparently, allegedly. Okay, so all this is learned behavior, and all this stems from what he might perceive as necessary actions. However, all this is learned behavior because of being in the army. Now, no matter who a perpetrator is, inside the perpetrator's mind, they all have a series of justifications which go on whenever they kill someone, or whenever any perpetrator does anything, if it's a bodily harm or killing or attempted killing. So, here we can also apply the techniques of neutralization theory. Avtar Singh has, so inside Avtar Singh's mind, he would of course deny injury. He would deny responsibility. He would say, I'm not the one who did it, somebody else did. I was just simply following orders. He might also think of things like, well, it was just a necessary act. I had to do it. He might have also thought, well, this person deserved this injury. So by saying that the victim deserves something, what you're doing is a technique of neutralization. You're basically denying injury. And in this case, we see something which we rarely see in other cases. Here, you can also definitely, for the killing of Jalil and Rabi and the eyewitnesses, you can definitely, at least for a chunk of those killings, you can definitely see that one technique of neutralization which definitely applies here is appeal to a higher authority. So, inside Avtar Singh's mind, he has prioritized his military career and his responsibility as a military person over any other moral consideration. And that's how he can justify a killing like that to himself. And this is the process which happens in the minds of anyone who perpetrates anything. Now, as you know, so many other theories can apply to so many different crimes, to all these crimes, because they were perpetrated under different circumstances. Must be a part of Avtar Singh which was also a bit paranoid, right? Because he constantly thought that somebody was coming after him, whether it was some military agency or somebody was trying to pin this on him, or he also apparently also said that Al Qaeda was after him. So it, if these things are not true, it does seem like he was genuinely going through paranoid thoughts and that somebody would come and get him someday. And basically, this explains why he would kill his entire family. His final act of familicide suggests that he was in psychological distress. His killings might have stemmed from paranoia. His killings might have stemmed from what he perceived to be institutional betrayal. And he was basically thinking, well, I'm doomed. I mean, it's inescapable. And that's why he took his entire family with him. Now, as you already know, but I should just underline this here, that I am not trying to justify what this person has done, but criminology and through legal analysis one just tries to understand why this all these set of killings happened. These two different sets of killings happened. Now, I did bring a little bit of legal analysis in the middle because I thought I should explain that a journalist wouldn't just be, a person would not just be able to get any kind of restraining order against any journalist, of course. Uh, and in this case, a restraining order was not issued. So you can tune in for a longer version of this explanation of why a person like Avtar Singh would perpetrate these kind of crimes from a psychological point of view. If you click on the link below, you will find the podcast. As you can tell, the podcast is not going to be identical to the video because I, of course, host that podcast with Sam and she's not in the video with us. For the psychological part, make sure to tune in to the podcast. So, as we always say in the podcast and here on the YouTube channel as well, that we can give each other so much more than just our thoughts and prayers. We can give each other our collective vigilance.